Hello everyone, welcome to my channel Inner Doors and Sacred Keys. In this segment of the Speaking Keys Tarot Study Series, we'll be taking a closer look at the symbolism of Key 1, the Magician. I do refer to the cards as keys to acknowledge the original purpose of the tarot as a textbook of sorts for spiritual development for those who are drawn to its particular path of study. The depth of spiritual knowledge and wisdom contained within the tarot has been protected throughout the generations and has transformed into the divination tool that is so widely popular today, as well as having been transformed into the playing cards that we know of. However, if you're someone who's a little bit more curious and would like to know more about the esoteric symbology of the tarot, you may find that you are being offered incredible tools to learn more about yourself and the reality that you are creating within your own world and within our collective world. The keys that I'm using can be found in the description below. This particular set is meant to be colored by the individual for spiritual enlightenment and development. However, I did color this deck with the pure desire and intention of sharing this knowledge and healing energy for the highest good for those who desire to receive. So it is, and so we begin. The Fool of Key 0 has stepped off of its lofty, ethereal heights of undifferentiated universal mind and into the experience of self-consciousness, which is represented by Key 1, the Magician. So, what is self-consciousness? Self-consciousness is the ego mind. It's the aspect of us that identifies as I. It's our personal, everyday, waking consciousness. It's also the single, universal conscious energy that is focused solely on you as its experience. So, in other words, your self-conscious is the one consciousness, the super consciousness, who identifies as I through you. So, that is pretty much what Key 1, the Magician, is trying to convey to us. But this is an incredibly profound way of understanding reality. So, let's go ahead and just take a look at this particular key. The first thing that may come at you, well, it certainly comes at me, is that there's a lot of yellow going on in this key. So yellow represents mercurial energy. Mercury is symbolic of the human mind, whereas Uranus is symbolic of superconsciousness. The color of Uranus is a paler yellow, whereas the color of Mercury is more saturated. So here we have the mercurial human mind is at play here. So the Fool is now experiencing self-consciousness as the human mind. Above the Magician, we see a trellis of roses. This trellis of roses represents the archaic form of a shelter or of a house, which is also represented by the Hebrew character at the lower right-hand corner, Beth, which means house. So what this key is telling us is that the superconsciousness needs a home to have its self-conscious experience within or as. The first thing that needs to happen before building a home, a space needs to be provided. So this key is also talking about how superconsciousness is creating a space for its abode, which is the self-consciousness. So it's speaking of how the different dimensions of reality are at work. In this dimension of reality of human mind, we use the tools of the five senses to experience our existence. Those five senses are being represented by the red roses within the trellis, as well as the five red roses that are within the garden that the magician is pointing towards. The roses are red, which is different from the white rose of the Fool. The red denotes passion, desire, physicality. It is the color of blood, of, well, at least of human blood, of fire. The red represents the creative force. Also, we can simply understand that the trellis is it's a product of nature. So it's produced by the natural world. So here we are being told that superconsciousness has created also the natural world for the human mind to have its dwelling place, as well as the superconsciousness having its dwelling place within self-consciousness. The green of the foliage represents the Venus energy, which is very much about abundance and multiplicity, reproducing, as well as being the contrast color to red. So this does speak of opposite polarity energies working together, which is also represented by the horizontal 8 that is flowing in motion above the head of the magician. The horizontal 8 represents the harmonious flow of the polarities, of the opposites. The magician has an innate understanding of how these polar opposites work as separate units, but also the power point where they intersect. And this is the energy that the magician uses to create. It is the understanding of this. This is what allows the magician to wield this power, this universal force. This key is known as the intelligence of transparency. Transparency meaning letting the light shine through. So the magician has the understanding that they are a conduit of this energy, this universal force. And to be able to consciously create one's reality is to be transparent, is to allow that light to shine through one's own creative endeavors. The magician in this key is male. The reason why the magician is being represented as male is to speak of the projective force of superconsciousness. At this particular state of superconsciousness becoming or experiencing itself through creation, it is being a projective energy and not a receptive energy. We'll see the receptive energy occurring with key 2, the High Priestess. But right now, at this particular point of, it's hard to, talk about time necessarily because there is no time, but at the stage, I suppose, is where superconsciousness is thrusting its energy forth, which is why we see the Fool walking off the cliff, but doing it rather intently, even though the Fool is looking at a particular point up at the horizon or above the horizon. So yes, so here the magician is male, but it's not because of it may have been, considering when the tarot was developed, it probably was a very, it was a very misogynistic, we're still living in a misogynistic time. So certainly that probably is part of it, but to be able to use the keys that suit you now, okay? And it's really important to understand that any esoteric tool that is at our use is meant to be used for us as individuals. So whatever the symbols that I'm trying to explain with this key, allow the key to speak to you, and allow that energy to be personal for you, okay? So even though the magician is being represented as male, think of it more as it being represented as the projective energy and not the receptive energy at this particular stage of superconsciousness's experience. Okay, so because there's a lot of actually phallic symbols within this key, because right now we see that the magician is holding a wand, and that wand is double pointed, and this is also indicative of a phallic symbol. So the reason why the phallus is being used as this symbology is that because it is a nerve center of the physical form and of our ethereal bodies. So it is the projective force, but it's double pointed, so it's speaking of as above, so below. Okay, that universal law. So this energy of projection is going in both directions, from both the superconsciousness and the self-consciousness. Even how the magician is standing, very upright, finger pointed, arm is up, even this is representing a very projective pose. The magician is directing energy from above to below. The magician here, instead of having the blonde hair of the Fool, this magician has dark hair. So again, keep in mind that we live in a reality of polarities. So even though colors represent certain things, it doesn't make anything inferior. Like inferior and superior natures or ideals are, they carry the same energy and they carry the same value. So here the hair is dark, and because it's dark, it represents ignorance, okay? But don't allow that to go across all frames of thinking and saying to oneself, well, then all colors that are dark represent ignorance. Allow the symbolisms to work properly with your life, right? Everything has a context. So here the context is that the dark hair represents the darkness, like the shadow, like we can't see, it's, we don't know what's in front of us. It's just the way it is. So in order for superconsciousness to have its existence in this frame of reality, it has to kind of forget, or else what's the reason of having creation if you remember like how to do everything immediately, or have, like, I'm reminded of like the hologram deck in Star Trek. So it's like, certainly we can probably work up to that on a human level, but that was part of being human, is that we work up to it. So super consciousness is having a human experience, which means that we're veiled in ignorance, that we don't remember like everything, like how to miraculously create everything we want immediately. We're in a realm of space where there's time, and within us creating, our creations happen, and certainly it can seem like they do happen immediately, but they may not turn about like exactly as we planned, or it did take more time for them to happen, or maybe we've even changed our mind while they were occurring. So that really is sort of the lesson of being in this space-time plane of existence. So the dark hair represents just the veil that is over the human mind. We just can't remember everything. The white band that goes around the head is of understanding, is of enlightenment. It's of purity. It's of remembering that source energy, the source energy. It's going around the forehead. This is actually pretty important to note, because again, the keys are speaking to the human faculties. So what separates humans from animals is the evolution of our frontal lobe, which is where our imagination is happening. A lot of our executive functioning is happening within the frontal lobe. This is where we're able to like project into the future, imagine the future. Animals don't necessarily experience those things to that degree. So to have this white band covering this particular area of the head and around this area of ignorance, right, again representing the dark hair, speaks of the most positive aspects that this key can have, which is the reason why that I use this particular deck to offer these lessons, because they were designed for this. To create consciously in alignment with super consciousness within one's life, it takes the awareness and transparency and connection with source energy. It's understanding that there's no separation between creator and creation, only the illusion thereof. So right now, super consciousness is in self-consciousness, experiencing itself, and it's like within its own dream in a way, but the dream is our reality, and it's very real. I mean, we have a matter. We can touch things, we can hold things, we experience things with our five senses. Again, the roses. The magician is also wearing a white garment, which is the same white garment that the fool is wearing. However, this time the outer garment is red and open. So red, again, denoting passion, desire, activity. And since it's not fastened close, it's able to move. So there's dynamic energy with this open robe. The white garment has a serpent as a belt. So this serpent speaks of Kundalini energy. However, the Kundalini energy is not where we understand it traditionally to be, where it's at the base of the spine. This is wrapped around the waist. So here's where digestion occurs. This is something that's just now occurring to me about this key. So what I'm understanding of this particular symbolism right now is that the Kundalini energy has been mitigated in such a way that it is now aligned with the digestive functioning, which is Virgo, but also the digestive tract is known as our like third brain. Well, esoterically speaking, it's our third brain. We have our brain that we know of in our head. There's a nerve center behind our heart, and then we have the nerve center of our digestive functionings. So there's something to be gained about understanding how being able to consciously use one's sexual force, which is the Kundalini, allows one to better utilize that powerful superconscious energy that just is. I mean, it's everywhere. It's creating all things. But when we're able to consciously use it, that's when we become conscious co-creators instead of just co-creators who are unaware of what we're doing. The color of the serpent is blue-green, which is representative of Scorpio energy. Again, Scorpio energy is very sexually potent. Scorpio also is ruled by Pluto as well as Mars, but Pluto is the god of the underworld, so a lot of shadow occurs there. So again, it's consciously coming to a means of, I don't know if the word control is the best way to describe what's happening with the Kundalini. It's like there's a symbiotic relationship occurring that the magician has conscious mitigation over. The magician's pointed hand is aimed in between the garden and the altar. The altar represents the plane of space and time, and the tools upon that plane are the chalice, the sword, the wand, and the pentacle. So each of these tools representing water, fire, air, and earth. These are the elements that the magician uses to create their personal reality as well as co-create reality with everyone, since we are all the magician. The finger is pointing directly at the tip of the wand, and it's interesting to note that it's also where the white lily is meeting, and I would just invite you to meditate on that. I find that interesting, and I'm sure with a little bit of meditation, an answer will come as to what the purpose of that is. But now we can put our attention to the garden. In fact, that's where the magician is putting their attention. His attention is to the garden. The garden represents subconsciousness. Self-consciousness and subconsciousness work together. Neither is greater than the other. They are equal. They are like two sides of the same coin, and that same coin being superconsciousness. Self-consciousness is the director of subconsciousness, which may go against popular thinking. As a society, we have been conditioned to believe that the subconscious functions are beyond our control. And to a certain extent, if that's what you're willing to accept, then yes, it is. However, to be the magician, to be the co-creator, the conscious co-creator that is our birthright, that is it's our path, our goal, our legacy, is to come to the realization that self-consciousness is the director of subconsciousness. When we consciously think something, our subconscious mind takes that information and brings it to fruition for us. Now, when we live our lives unaware, we may think that life is happening to us. But when we begin the journey of self-awareness, we learn that it is actually what we are paying attention to that is coming into our field of existence. It's kind of like when you kind of start off like having a bad morning, and you might just wake up not having slept well, feeling a little off, and now you're starting your day, but you've become clumsy and you're dropping things, or you've stubbed your toe, or you've hit your elbow, and it just makes everything a little bit worse. And then before you know it, you're in the car and other drivers are making you angry, and so it can just be a bit of a downward spiral. So in those moments, we may be thinking, oh, life is happening to me. Certainly, I'm not making this happen to myself, which it's a comfortable thought, of course. It's much more easier to feel like it is happening to us. But truly, when we learn to be an effective creator of our life, then we can stop where we're putting our attention and refocus our attention. So yes, if we may have stubbed our toe, we became upset, but we can gather ourselves, redirect our mind, redirect our attention, and start from a different point, and work to have a better experience. Now, this takes skill, it takes practice. It's not necessarily a skill that we're born with. Again, superconsciousness has stepped into self-conscious mind where there's a veil of ignorance and we have to relearn. But that's sort of the strange, blessed irony of being alive. So within the garden, we have 5 roses, which reflect the 5 roses in the trellis. Now, obviously, they're not in perfect reflection. Again, when we are creating, our creation may not come out exactly as we thought it would, but we may still be getting pretty much what we had wanted. So we have the 5 roses being shown in both the trellis and the garden, and we also have 4 white lilies. From the reading material that I've come across, there seems to be a lot of depth to the white lily's symbology, but I haven't really cracked that nut yet. So when I meditate upon it, I think of the 4 directions, because again, superconsciousness has stepped into the realm of space. So we need to have 4 directions, and then we have the magician pointing to both up and down. So there's 6, and then he's the center point, which is 7 directions. So I feel like it's just again speaking of this realm of space. They're white, which talks about, again, that pure universal source energy. And they're flowers. So it's part of the natural world, it's prolific, it's regenerative. And the yellow stamen within the middle of the lilies reminds me of mercurial energy. So again, it's one of those things I invite you to meditate upon for yourself, to see what dawns upon you, what download you may receive. So let's see. Lastly, with the symbology, I would like to mention is the number one. The number one is the single point. It is the point of initiation. It is where all things begin. So again, and also it's a very phallic symbol. So here, superconsciousness is having its starting point. And that starting point, from our understanding, is human mind. But let's remember that the world is not all just human mind. There are animals, there are plant species, there are microbes, there are other minds experiencing superconsciousness. Or let me say, superconsciousness is having an experience through many, many different minds. But here, with the study of Tarot, we are talking specifically about the human mind. So as we go along, it'll be interesting because, again, when the Tarot was formed, a very patriarchal way of looking at the world. And as we have evolved, as humanity has evolved and are evolving, hopefully we'll do a little bit faster, to understand that we are actually part of a broader natural process, that we are not above the natural world, that we are actually part of this whole life cycle. This is a bit of where the challenge of studying Tarot's esoteric roots kind of comes up to a bit of a bump for me. Because this key also, from traditionally speaking, speaks of how the human mind is above nature. Meaning that the human mind has evolved to such a point that it is able to manipulate the resources of the natural world, for better or for worse. So here's where the human needs to, well, it's imperative that the human being, as individuals and as a collective, the human mind, finds its proper alignment with the natural world, so we don't continue on this disastrous path of destruction. So it isn't necessarily that the human mind is above the natural world, it's just that the human mind has evolved to a point where it can disastrously manipulate the natural world. And it is really up to us as individuals. Again, the single point, the superconsciousness is having its experience through us, but we make the conscious decisions. So it's important that us as individuals make conscious decisions to live within balance with our environment and those living beautiful beings within our environment, human or animal or plant or mineral or what have you. So practically speaking, when you receive this key in a reading, superconsciousness is reminding you that you are a powerful point of force. You are a powerful point of attention. Creation is so mysterious, amazing, and beautiful, which is why I really do enjoy the Tarot, because it helps me understand how these forces are operating. Superconsciousness is so enamored with the desire of life that each point of consciousness, it experiences itself as I. So it's almost as if you or me or a blade of grass or a ladybug or your house cat. It's as if that was the only living creature to exist. And so much love and so much attention is being paid to that one experience. But yet, there's a multitude of these points having this experience of life in their own unique way, in their own unique perspective. And that is what is so incredible, so beautiful, and it's also what the garden is representing. All of these amazing possibilities having its existence already, but we have yet to pay attention to those things. But superconsciousness is paying attention, and that's why these things exist. So, with that, keep in mind that you are the creator of your beautiful, miraculous, amazing, and yes, sometimes tragic life, but it's yours. And superconsciousness source energy is so connected with you. All that needs to happen is to become aware. And it's possible with practice, with desire, perseverance, with love, with just taking time with yourself and opening up yourself. And well, the tarot is a good way to help with that journey. Thank you so much for joining me. Our next segment will be on Key 2, the High Priestess. I do plan on getting these videos out a little bit quicker, as well as providing daily tarot readings for the collective. So please subscribe, please like, and I will talk to you soon. Until next time.